My last couple of videos dealt with setting up word problems and solving algebraic equations. So in this video, I'd like to put those two topics together and actually solve these word problems. So set them up, create an algebraic equation that represents the problem, and then solve it. Although in my previous video, I went through the whole lecture on how to approach solving word problems. So in this video, I'm just going to focus mainly on the solutions to the specific problems here. I'm going to cover the first three problems on the worksheet in this video, and then I'll have a separate video, which you should watch right after this one, where I cover problems 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so 1/2 of a number is 3. 1/2 of a number is 3 more than 1/6 the same number. What is the number? So in my last video about word problems, I talked about identifying key terms or key words that normally translate the same way. And a big one is. It's the word is. So is generally translates to an equal sign. So we have 1/2 of a number is 3 more than 1/6 the same number. And I also talked about the word of meaning multiplication. So there's an of here. The word of followed by a number, whether it's a number you know or a number you don't know, of followed by a number generally means multiplication. And there's another of in this sentence that's sort of implied, not explicitly written. So if you look at that second statement, the one after the word is, 3 more than 1/6 the same number. Well, another way we could say that, 3 more than 1/6 of the same number. So the word of, even though it's not written, it's there because we could restate this with the word of and mean the same thing. Okay, so the first thing you should write down in any word problem is what your variable or your symbol represents. And so we look at the last sentence, which usually tells us what we're looking for. What is the number? Okay, we know it is a number, we just don't know what it is. So we give it a symbol. So let's say X represents, or X stands for the unknown number. Okay, so now we could translate the question, which is given in English, to the language of math. So 1/2 of a number. Well, 1/2, that's the number 1/2. Of is multiplication. A number, well, that's what we're using the symbol X for. X is that number. So 1/2 of a number is equals 3 more than 1/6 of the same number. So here's 1/6, not 1/2, 1/6, 1/6 the number, or 1/6 of the number. And we have 3 more than this. So when you say 3 more than, well, it's 3 more than something. So the plus 3 should come at the end. So more than, less than, terms like that come at the end of your equation. So we have 1/2 of a number is 3 more than 1/6 of the same number. All right, so here's our mathematical equation. And once you do this, it's no longer a word problem. It's an equation to solve. 1/2 x equals 1/6 x plus 3. And generally speaking, as I mentioned in my last video on solving word problems, the setup, the creating the equation, is usually the hard part. I'm not saying solving equations is easy, but in terms of solving a word problem, generally speaking, it's more challenging to set it up first before you actually solve it. All right, so now we have an equation to solve. We want to get all of our x's to one side. So let's subtract 1/6 x from the right. So they cancel. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. Okay, so we have an equal sign. The only thing left on the right is the number 3. And now on the left, well, what is 1/2 x minus 1/6 x? Well, what is 1/2 minus 1/6? Well, in order to subtract fractions, and we've seen this before, we need a common denominator. You cannot subtract or add fractions without first getting that common denominator. So we could multiply this first fraction by 3/3. So the 1/2 becomes a 3/6, and then we're subtracting off the 1/6, which gives us 2/6, and 2/6 reduces to 1/3. And so now this 1/3, we'll use that over here. 1/2 x minus 1/6 x equals 1/3 x. And if you need to go back to my previous video from last week, there's a video on adding, subtracting fractions, and getting common denominators. All right, so now we're trying to solve for x. So the times 1/3, well, that's another way of writing, it's another way of saying x/3. You don't have to rewrite it like this if you don't want to, but 1/3 times x is the same as saying x/3, because 1/3 times x, well, you could say x is x/1. So top times top is x, and the bottom times bottom is 3. Okay, so that's x/3. So we have division. We have x divided by 3 equals 3, and the opposite of dividing by 3 is times 3. So you always want to do the opposite of whatever it is you're trying to eliminate. So we're trying to eliminate the dividing by 3. So we multiply by 3, and whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And on the left-hand side, so I like to separate my steps with a red line. On the left-hand side, the times 3 divide by 3, they cancel, so we have x. And on the right, we have 9. So 9 would be the solution to this problem. Okay, that was number 1 on the worksheet, so let's move on to number 2. And so I'm just going to copy in number 2. The sum of 2 consecutive integers is -205. Find the larger integer. Okay, so some keywords here. Sum, S-U-M, that means addition. Okay, consecutive, that means one after another. So consecutive numbers would be like 3, 4, or 11, 12, or 151, 152, etc. Those would be consecutive numbers. So the sum of 2 consecutive integers, integer means whole numbers, is, so there's the keyword is means equals, is -205. Find the larger integer. Well, we can't just talk about the larger one without also talking about the smaller one. So this problem is referring to 2 things that are unknown, 2 numbers. Now, the directions could have easily said find both integers or find the smaller integer. Either way, we have to work with both of them. So there's a smaller number, there's a larger number. And we don't know what either of them are, so we're going to have to give them symbols. That's what algebra is, using symbols to represent unknown numbers or to temporarily represent unknown numbers. So if the first number, you could say smaller, larger, or first, second, if we call the first number x, Oh, what are we going to call the second number? Well, the numbers are consecutive, which means one after another. So like I said, 3, 4, 11, 12, so on and so on. So with consecutive numbers, the second number is always one more than the first number. So for the larger number, we could call this one more than the smaller number. So x plus 1. And so now we have to translate this to an equation. The sum of two consecutive integers. Well, now we have represented those two consecutive integers using symbols. X is the symbol for a small number, and x plus 1 is the symbol for a larger number. So the sum means we add these two numbers together. So smaller number, x, plus larger number, x plus 1, equals negative 205. Well, we have x plus x, so we have two x's on the left, so we could call that 2x plus 1 equals negative 205. Now we have to solve for x. Get x by itself. Isolate the x. So we want to get rid of the 1. The opposite of plus 1 is a minus 1, so we could minus 1 or subtract 1 from both sides. That will eliminate the plus 1 on the left, leaving us with the 2x. And then we have a minus 205 minus 1. So the minus 205 is becoming more negative, so that becomes minus 206. And now we have 2x equals a negative 206. This is multiplication. So to get rid of the times 2, we divide both sides by 2. And that will give us x on the left and a negative 103 on the right. So just because, and this is important, just because we've solved for x doesn't mean we've answered the question fully. So let's take this x equals negative 103 back to the our definitions of the symbol x. So x is negative 103. And the larger number is 1 more than that. So if we add 1, we get negative 102. So the answer to the question, what is the larger number? Larger number is, larger number is negative 102. And that would be the answer to the word problem. All right, let's do one more in this video, and I'll save the other 3 for the next video, so it's not too much to watch all at once, but you should watch the second half of this video very soon after finishing this portion of it. All right, number 3, a square plywood platform has a perimeter which is 10 times the length of a side, decreased by 30. Find the length of a side. Well, I always say anytime you could sketch a picture, even a very simple sketch of the problem, it's usually beneficial. So we have a square piece of plywood, and we don't know how long each side is. Find the length of a side. Okay, so if we call this x, that means every side is the same, x and x. So when I say define your variable, write down explicitly what x stands for. You could do it in words, or you could do it with a picture like this. In this diagram, it's obvious that x is the length of one side. Or you could write x equals length of a side. Either way. All right, so now let's go back to the problem. The square has a perimeter which equals 10 times the length of a side decreased by 30. Okay, so this sentence is saying that the perimeter is 10 times the length of a side decreased by 30. All right, so the word is. Anything before the is the left-hand side of the equation. Anything after the word is the right-hand side. So the perimeter. Well, what's the perimeter of this square? The perimeter of any shape is you add up all the sides. In this case, there's 4 sides. Each one is x, so x plus x plus x plus x gives you 4x. The perimeter is 4x. Okay, so the perimeter is equals 10 times the length of a side. And the length of a side, we're calling that x. So 10 times the length of a side would be 10 times x. And then decreased by 30. So decreased means subtraction. So we have a minus 30. All right, so there's our equation, and now we could go ahead and solve this equation. We want to get all our variables to one side. So there's already a number on the right, so let's keep the number on the right and bring the x's to the left. So we have a positive 10x on the right. We could get rid of that with a minus 10x. And whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. So we have 4x minus 10x. That should be a minus 6x. You have equals. The positive 10x, the negative 10x, they cancel. So we are left with negative 30. And one more step to solve for x. On the left, we have negative 6 times x. The opposite of times negative 6. Divide by negative 6. So divide both sides by negative 6. And it looks like we're done. The times negative 6, divide by negative 6, they cancel. So we have x equals negative 30 divided by negative 6. The negatives cancel. And 30 divided by 6 equals 5. And that answers the question. The length of a side is 5 units long. We don't know if it's inches, feet, centimeters, or whatever, but the answer is the length of the side is 5 units. All right. That does it for the first 3 problems. I'm going to stop this video and then record a second one, like I said, with problems 4, 5, and 6.